Hello, scientists. Today we're going to continue to explore our unit question, which is why do species change over time and should we intervene? In our journey today, we have 3 stops. The first stop is reviewing selective breeding and genetic engineering. The second stop is comparing and contrasting both processes using a Venn diagram. And our final step or stop is gathering clues to determine if a process described refers to selective breeding or genetic engineering. All right, so let's begin with our review. So the first process we want to go over is genetic engineering. And genetic engineering involves the movement of gene segments from one organism to another. Often, a gene from a species is added to an organism's genome to give it a desired trait. So what do we mean by that, right? Let's go over some basic general steps involved in genetic engineering. So the first step is that your desired gene with a specific trait and a bacterial plasmid is cut off. And this is usually done using an enzyme. So that's why I went ahead and I actually added like a little scissor logo, just so you remember that the enzyme does the cutting. So you have your desired gene now represented in blue, and you have your bacterial plasmid represented in red. In step 2, you're going to take your desired gene and your bacterial plasmid, and you're going to join them together. And so that's why I have this visual where you see both the gene and the bacterial plasmid combined. Now, we want to make lots of copies of this gene. And so we actually use bacteria as our, I would say, factory to produce many of these genes. We know that bacteria reproduce asexually and they do it relatively quickly. So we're going to take bacteria containing the desired gene and let it reproduce, right? And then we're going to have that desired gene that can then be collected from the bacteria. Last but not least, the gene is then inserted into the new organism cell and it becomes part of its genome, right? So with genetic engineering, you're selecting this gene from one organism that has a trait that you really want, and you are transferring it to another organism with the goal of that organism now having that trait. All right, so now let's look at another process. Let's go ahead and investigate selective breeding, okay? So selective breeding is a little different because you're choosing parents that have characteristics that you want. So one parent has this trait you really like, and another parent has a trait that you really like, and you're breeding them together to produce offspring with more desirable traits, right? And this process takes place over many generations. Step 1 in this process would be to decide what characteristic is important enough to select for. So in this situation, I want angelfish that have long fins. And so the second step is choosing parents that have this characteristic. In this case, long fins, right? And so you're going to breed these parents. And then once you observe the offspring, you're going to choose the best offspring from the parents to produce the following generation. And of course, if I want angelfish with long fins, I'm going to look for those children that have long fins to breed them, because that's going to increase my chances of getting lots of offspring in the following generation with that trait, right? And last but not least, you got to repeat this process over and over again, because the more you repeat it, you're going to see there's going to be an increase in that trait amongst the offspring. And that's really the goal, right? All right, so now that we've reviewed both genetic engineering and selective breeding, let's go ahead and complete a Venn diagram. You have a few descriptions in boxes. And what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to sort them. Would they go in the selective breeding side? Would they go in the center, meaning that both processes have that? Or would they go in the genetic engineering side because the description is about genetic engineering? So go ahead and try that out. And when you're done, you can press play again to see if you were on the right track. And if not, totally fine. You're going to learn from your mistakes and try to get a clearer understanding of the process. All right, so welcome back. This is our answer key, and I'm going to quickly go over it so that you can look over your work and see if you were on track, and if you made any errors, try to understand where you went wrong and self-correct. So for selective breeding, we have 3 description boxes that were placed there. The first is that the desired gene or trait is found within the species genome. The second description box states that it has taken place for thousands of years since early civilization began, using agricultural practices to produce their food rather than relying on hunting or gathering. And lastly, improvements take place over many generations, as I stated previously. In the center, we have that both processes use the knowledge of DNA, right? And the relationship between genes and traits. The second description box states that the goal is to produce plants and animals with improved genetic characteristics. And lastly, humans influence the inheritance of desired traits. On the genetic engineering side, we have that the desired trait or gene is actually identified in one organism and then transferred to another. So the desired gene or trait is not found within the genome of that particular species. And so that's why it requires advanced technology and a transfer of a gene from one organism to another. So now that we have reviewed both processes and compared and contrasted them, I hope that we have a clear understanding of how they're both very different, but also similar. They have some similarities, right? And so I created a little review for you guys, and I'm going to model what my expectation is for the following pages. It is super important that you're able to differentiate between both processes, and a clear understanding of each process entails that skill, right? Being able to say, well, this is genetic engineering versus this is selective breeding. So I want to kind of help you review some examples and try to look for some clues that will help you determine which process it's referring to. So let's go ahead and read the scenario and try to do just that. So a variety of strawberry with the 2 desirable qualities, resistance to a damaging fungus and production of large fruits, results from crossing strawberries with each of these traits over many generations. So immediately I'm looking for clues, right? What's going to help me determine if this is selective breeding or genetic engineering? So some of the clues I picked out were results from crossing strawberries with each of these traits. And a second clue I picked up was many generations. It's not a quick process. It takes place over a pretty good length of time. And so those 2 clues helped me come to the conclusion that this is describing selective breeding. And so I went ahead and I put an S for selective breeding. I want you to try that out with the other examples as well, so that you can fine tune your skill of differentiating between both. So let's go to the following page. You'll see this very same format. There's going to be a description, and you have to decide if it's selective breeding or genetic engineering based on some clues that you're going to pick out from your reading. I also included a visual component so that you're able to not just identify it from a description, but also from a visual diagram. I hope this helps you differentiate between both processes, and it supports your understanding of them so that you can complete your independent work today successfully. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to you guys doing amazing on your independent practice and impressing your teachers. Take care.